Hello everyone, and welcome to this breakout session. This is Women in Work, the role of women in the future of the UK workforce. And I think the purpose of this session is to go a bit beyond perhaps some of sort of the immediate sort of policies. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening in the labour market right now, and you know, one could argue that women are disproportionately disadvantaged by some of the changes that have happened. So I'm thinking about changes to loan parent income support eligibility coming in for a number of years. Obviously, universal credit and the effect on second earners that's still to be worked out from October next year. Increasing to the state pension age equalisation, affecting women particularly born sort of in the mid-1950s. Child benefit freezes, the falling number of part-time jobs in the economy associated obviously with the falling number of public sector jobs and the flexi time and that. And also reductions in working tax credit reimbursement for childcare, which obviously came in last year and has had a big effect. We had Stephen Timms talking about that this morning. And yes, it's a very difficult time. We have just over 1.1 million women unemployed in the economy. We saw Chris Grayling yesterday, and hopefully join us later, I hope, saying that that a lot of stay-at-home mums are feeling under economic pressure to come back into the economy, which is why we've seen some of those ONS stats pointing out that a lot of women are coming back into the workforce, seeking work, but not necessarily getting it. So you get a rise in the activity rate, but not the job rate. Anyway, enough wonk speak. So we have a great panel with us today to discuss this. So on my far left is Nora Senior, Vice President of the British Chambers of Commerce, and to my left is Emma Stewart, co-founder of Women Like Us. To my right is Charlotte Veer, founder of the think tank Women On, and to my far right is Dr. Rhys Morgan, Head of Secretariat to Education for Engineering. So I'm just going to ask our speakers to give us sort of 5 or 7 minutes each, and then we'll come on to questions. So I think we said, Charlotte, if you would like to start first.
Thank you very much. And although we were going to talk about the detail, I do want to do a quick overview of where I see the state of play at the moment. Women are the largest single factor we have at our disposal to achieve economic growth. And we haven't even scratched the surface in understanding the very complex issues involved in the relationship between women and work. But the opportunity cost of us not helping women to achieve their potential in the workplace is absolutely enormous. In fact, it is the biggest single factor that we could use to turn around our economy. And yet, I've been talking about this for a while now, for the last sort of 6 to 8 months, about women, about workplace. Not a huge number of people want to listen. And I think, given the number of people who are in here today, it actually shows that. We haven't created the right narrative for being even able to talk about women in the workplace. So let's just have a quick look at where we are in the political spectrum. On the left, we have anti-cuts campaigners like the Fawcett Society, who frame any conversation around women about how much they do or do not get from the government. That's pretty much it. They assume that the cost of childcare is always borne by the woman. Oh, it's not worth her going back to work because the cost of childcare. Where did the man go? Has he disappeared all of a sudden? And we have the Labour Party, bizarrely, seeking quotas for women on boards. Let's be absolutely clear. These people are non-executive directors of the largest companies in our country. If you are a woman working for Vodafone on 27 grand a year in a shop on the high street, I'm sorry, you don't know who your board is. You don't actually care very much. So we have a purely elitist concern when it comes to that. So what I see is that the left have completely and utterly forgotten about the millions and millions of low and middle income women who are either in the workplace or who are striving to get back to the workplace. On the right, we're stuck in a time warp. We have Jill Kirby, for example, on Conservative Home, saying that women would quite like to stay at home with the children, actually. Well, I should imagine men would too. This whole sacred cow of the stay-at-home mother has to at some point be addressed and to a certain extent slaved. I'm a governor of a primary school. The vast majorities of my mums are stay-at-home mums. They are not particularly engaged with their children's education. They don't come to parents' meetings. They don't meet with their children. So if we say that stay-at-home mums shouldn't be in the workplace, we're not going to raise feral children. So also we have the government also on this Women on Boards agenda, wasting quite a lot of time and effort on, again, trying to fix that supposedly broken element of our economy. And they too have forgotten about the millions of low and middle income women who are either in the workplace or trying to get back. So what do we need to do? We need to do a huge amount of work on this to create a holistic view of the relationship between women and the workplace. I'm finding that people are too scared to get involved. They don't want to talk about it. Many of you from business will know that women often fall into the CSR agenda. They're women, put you with the donkey sanctuary and childlife. It is time to recognise that we have to take this very seriously indeed. And the reason is absolutely clear. The under-29s in this country, women, earn more than men. They are also, on average, better educated than men. Those women are about to have children. Things are going to get very, very complicated, and for once in our lives we need to be ahead of the game and recognise that we have to maintain the economic potential of all of these individuals. I won't go into detail because I'm sure in the questions that we will go into detail about the issues that can be done and that shouldn't be done. I think pedestal feminism, this idea that women are somehow different and so therefore should be included, is an absolute red herring. The issue is the opportunity cost of not involving some of the most talented people in our society. So I hope, will go on to talk about things like parental leave, how it should be parity between gender, but also between life stage. Let's not have a parent trap. We should talk about flexibility in the workforce, and we need to talk about childcare. It's hugely expensive. And someone who runs a private nursery said to me the other day, he felt he was being nationalised by the back door with the amount of government interference on how he can provide childcare. So what we should be ending up with, what our focus has to be in all of this, is equilibrium. We mustn't have quotas. We mustn't be trying to force women into jobs if they don't want to be there. But we must understand that there is a huge economic potential and we are missing out.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlotte. Yes, I was interested, again, Stephen Sims talking about the supply side of childcare. I think it's a next revolution perhaps to hit us. I think, Emma, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I'd just like to talk about what I see as being one of the biggest barriers for women's representation in the workplace. And as Charlotte's actually said, I think it's at the point that they have children. We know that women outperform men in education. They do just as well at entering the professions and represent 51% of the workforce. The problem is, when women become mothers, they choose and want often to seek to balance work with family responsibilities, as increasingly do men. But they face real challenges in negotiating this, as do businesses as well. They need to negotiate flexible hours, enable to return from maternity leave. They need to find and pay for childcare, ensure that their work covers the cost of their childcare. And a key issue in terms of welfare policy particularly is that they need to find a new job often, if they've been out of work for some time, that they can fit around family when looking to return to the workplace. And at Women Like Us, we think that the lack of quality part-time jobs in the marketplace for women to move into is probably one of the most significant barriers that they face. It's also a significant barrier in helping business to access talent. So the gender pay gap is actually at its greatest when you look at the difference between part-time and full-time. It's about 39%. In some respects, you could call it a motherhood pay penalty, or actually a part-time pay penalty. So there are issues that are wider here than actually just gender. But for women, it's got significant consequences. We know that maternal unemployment is one of the key drivers for child poverty. We know that women often, in fact almost half of women are estimated to be downgrading in their skills and experience in return for flexibility, and that has a significant issue in pushing many lower skilled women out of the labour market altogether. And it also means that businesses are missing out on talent. They're missing out on being able to retain and maximise women's skills, and there are challenges in finding and seeking a pipeline at intermediary level to move these women up into senior level and ultimately into board level positions. And women particularly face a really stark choice. They find a job and they downgrade their skills in return for flexibility, or they don't work at all. As we know, over 1 million women are in that situation at the moment. So at Women Like Us, we were actually set up because we felt that the biggest issue to address was the recruitment market failure around quality part-time and flexible jobs. We've got about 32,000 women registered with us currently in London who want to find work that has reduced hours, where they don't compromise their skills and experience for doing so. And we offer them careers advice and support, but significantly we also run a recruitment agency that specialises in quality part-time vacancies. And in doing so, significantly, we've helped over 2,000 businesses to be able to access this talent and to reap the business benefits. And we work with corporates who come to us because, from their perspective, they are struggling with a diversity agenda. And we work with SMEs particularly who come to us because actually the business case for them is very, very clear. They get good quality, good talent for less. They're able to get access to women who they may otherwise not be able to afford on a 5-day week, but on a 2-day week, pro rata obviously, it makes good sense for them to come to us. So what's the problem with the part-time vacancy market? Despite record numbers of people in part-time employment in the economy, and as we saw from ONS, the numbers have gone up even again today, the lack of quality part-time vacancies, which is essential for job seekers, has received far less attention. And actually so little, in fact, that often when ministers talk about part-time, it's about employment. But we know that ONS don't actually collect details of part-time vacancies. The only way that they are able to monitor that is through Job Centre Plus. But at the same time, they talk to about 6,000 employers on a regular basis for full-time vacancies. So it's completely off the radar in terms of government policy. So we recently conducted some research for Women Like Us with support of Joseph Rowntree Foundation into the vacancy market. We interviewed 1,000 employers, and we found that of all the vacancies they currently had, only 3% of those vacancies were part-time and over 20,000 pro rata. And that was in comparison to well over half of the full-time vacancies they had that were over 20,000. So it's a really, really underdeveloped market. So what can we do to change this? Well, we think to help more women to get into and on in work, it's really essential to help employers to reap the business benefits more effectively of recruiting people into quality part-time jobs. It's got to work for business as much as for women. And we ask employers what they need to make this work for them through our research and through the recruitment agency that we run. And they tell us they want more evidence of the business case. They want to see where it can work. And actually, all of those that we've worked with and all of those that we interviewed who've used part-time, who've recruited senior part-time people, have had positive experiences. The only ones who've got negative perceptions are those who haven't actually done it. So we need to get those messages out. Employers also want more practical help in designing part-time jobs and thinking about flexibility and how you embed that. Changing the 9-to-5 default isn't easy. And it's not easy for big businesses, it's equally not easy for small businesses. And then the third thing that employers tell us they want is a more visible candidate pool. They can go to Job Centre Plus, but they can't go to recruitment agencies because most recruitment agencies don't really do part-time and they don't have that many part-time candidates on their books. So who can affect this change? So briefly, there is a role for government, but we don't think the answer lies in more legislation. Flexible working legislation, whilst really important for employees, will not benefit job seekers per se. You're not going to give flexibility to someone you never met before at an interview. And also, the answer doesn't lie in purely job seeker-facing government programmes. We think the best thing that government can do is to start changing the debate about flexible working away from one about retention and the regulatory burdens of flexibility, and to start championing the business benefits of part-time job creation as an aid to growth and an aid to the business community. And for welfare to work programmes to work, and particularly for women for them to work, we think the approach needs to evolve away from a work first and actually to an employer first. So why can't prime contractors give some support to SMEs who don't have an internal HR function to help them design a job so that they can recruit a job seeker into that role? And there are implications and a role for employer groups and recruitment agencies as well in this. The message about championing part-time does need to go out to employers. And we think also that the offer needs to be widened. In this current economic climate, this isn't just about job matching, this is about organisational development and workforce development as well. And finally, we think that employers themselves do need to start shining a light on part-time and recognising and tracking the actual impact of all their diversity policies and practices that they already have in place on actually how many more part-time quality vacancies they can create and opportunities they can create for women through the pipeline. And I think if we can start moving to a place where everybody takes on this role and thinks about this agenda, from our perspective, this is going to help men as well as women. I mean, both parents want to balance work and family life increasingly. We know that Generation Y has said the most important thing in terms of work these days for them is some flexibility. But I think in tight economic times, the most important message that we will get out, and we want to get out to policymakers, is you have to get that business message out to businesses. This is about tight budgets, about reshaping the way that jobs work, and ultimately in doing that, we'll be able to help both sexes to be able to get on in work.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma. Very interesting. Lots of good thought there. Rhys, would you like to?
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to focus a little bit on science and engineering and technology sectors. This is a particular problem for the UK economy. The Royal Society of Edinburgh, in its most recent report, said that 73% of women graduating in science and engineering and technology subjects don't pursue careers in those roles, in those fields. And it's calculated that doubling the number of women entering industry with graduating from those subjects would generate an extra £170 million per year. So I agree with Charlotte, there is an opportunity cost to women not going into the workplace, and we're losing out. For engineering in the UK, the problem is particularly bad. Only 8% of the engineering workforce are women, the lowest in Europe. We have deep-rooted perceptions of engineering in the UK, the image that it's dirty and oily, and it's reinforced through media stereotypes. And we often hear the language of industry dying in the UK, which is far from the truth. So we in the engineering profession are working extra hard to counteract those perceptions. And there's two things I'd like to talk about. Firstly, what we're doing in schools, and secondly, in the work that employers need to do and the work in employment. So first, engineering. For engineering, the issue begins at school. We know girls, as we've heard, are as good as boys in the education sphere. In science and mathematics, they're equal. There are roughly equal numbers of entries for triple science and mathematics, and similarly for double science and mathematics. And the attainment levels are about the same as well. But there's a significant drop-off of girls entering the engineering and science subjects from Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5, mainly in A-level physics, where only 18% of the cohort are girls. And then that escalates as we go on to university. So we know girls can do it, but they choose not to. And we need to understand what's going on there. And at the Royal Academy of Engineering, we've spent some time trying to understand those issues. And it's a lot to do with this young people being able to identify themselves and conceptualize themselves in careers that might not typically they would identify themselves with. Because in the UK, well, in general, gender stereotyping starts at a very early age. And so a young person's identity or self-conception of working in an engineering career is very difficult to create. And once it is created, if we can get girls thinking about being engineers or scientists or technology in those kind of roles, it's a very fragile concept, because there are so many strong countercurrents, cultural countercurrents against engineering in our society. And so, and it's only through role models and support that we get young people to see themselves in these roles. In fact, I've often, with slight tongue-in-cheek, said that we don't have any problems with diversity in engineering. We just don't attract anyone. And it's only the children of engineers that will go into engineering. But I think there is an element of truth in that. So to reinforce that identity, this kind of self-concept, if you like, we have to have multiple interactions right through the school education phase of a young person's life. Getting children to work on real problems in the D&T class, making the problems relevant to girls and to boys. And then in ICT lessons, getting girls and boys to do real programming instead of, dare I say it, in this building, working on a particular suite of office software. But once you've got them getting a feeling that they can actually solve engineering problems and they like science and they do science, then you can start to build their idea of taking on a career in that phase. But it's a long, drawn-out process, and role models are key, and role models coming into schools from industry are really important in this endeavour. It's not about getting everyone to choose engineering, it's just making sure that children at the right times make the right decisions so they don't preclude themselves from any future opportunities. When it comes to employment and employers, I think it's all about leadership, and it's from the boardroom downwards. If leaders have a vision of diversity for a company and they demonstrably act on that vision, then it will permeate through the organisation. And we've heard, there needs to be a shift in the culture of the workplace. Organisations need to move away from the all-hours culture. It's not just about women, but it's also about men. Men feel the pressure of presenteeism in the workplace as well. And I think gender equality is for both sexes, and family-friendly policies are for everyone. So very briefly, there are 4 key aspects that I think are really important. Recruitment. There's a real economic case for recruiting the right people, and a colleague of mine in industry said they would work to a loss of around £40,000 to £50,000 if a poor decision meant that the person they recruited left within a year. And so making sure that when you advertise your jobs, they are appropriate for women and for men to apply. And if you're using a recruitment consultant, that you ensure your expectations for diversity are passed on to them as well. And then when applicants do come for an interview, making sure they get the right impression, who they meet in the workplace and things like that are very important. Once you do recruit someone, once employees are in the job, ensuring that new starters, particularly women, have a positive early experience, providing them with mentors or sponsors from senior management, and ensuring that women have a vision, a clear vision of what to aspire to. And support mechanisms as well. I was recently at a talk where Arup, the engineering consultancy firm, have a women's network who provide seminars for women on progression through the workplace and various aspects of the company. But it's not just open to women, it's open to men as well. Although the session they had in LK Bennett choosing shoes to wear for work was mainly attended by women, I believe. But then there are promotion opportunities as well, ensuring that promotion is transparent, there are diverse applicants for promotion, and mitigating against unconscious bias in the selection process as well is a very important aspect. And then we've heard a lot about returning to work from Emma, but there's a real cost to business to lose an employee that you've invested all these years in, and then suddenly for them to decide they don't want to come back to the workplace because you're not offering them part-time work. I mean, it just seems madness to me. You've invested God knows how much money in them. So making good and appropriate use of keep in touch days, getting mothers back, and to see where they can fit into the organisation. They don't want to feel they're a burden to the team they left behind. There needs to be flexible learning. There needs to be plenty of opportunities and choice for progression throughout the organisation. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhys. Okay, Nora, would you like to start with a perspective from business?
I think there's a lot that's been said, that some of which I agree with, some of which I disagree with. I think for me, speaking with a business head on, acceptance and credibility are still concerning issues, and acceptance by peers and senior management of business for women in the workplace, particularly with regard to flexible working and part-time working, and their ability to be able to deliver is where business needs to be convinced that having women in the workplace is going to be an attribute. And I have to say that myself, working in an international company, I, like other businesses, face a dilemma where I have to allow for being able to answer client calls across different time zones, across different sectors. And if I don't have someone there who is basically at the receiving end of that client's call, then my client needs me not to be delivering that service, and then will therefore move on to another consultancy who will opt to deliver that service. So there is a dilemma for the business person who is faced with being able to deliver a global service round the clock, but not have the people that will do it. And most businesses will look for an element of unpaid input into
into their employment position. And if you're working part-time or if you have to leave at a specific time, then it puts an added burden on the employer to be able to fulfill the contracts that they have. So it is a barrier for employers to look at women in terms of delivery on that. Also, if and this is where some of the divide and the resentment from the male workforce comes from. If the male counterpart is there to work around the clock and basically take all the out of hours calls, etc., and respond to a crisis, the client actually comes to rely on that person as their service individual. Therefore, it's the client's drive to make sure that the male is promoted rather than they look to their service requirements being fulfilled by a woman. So I think that there is a dilemma from business there. Also, in reality, a junior person moving up through a company, through middle management into senior management, doesn't just need the skills for the job. They need skills like management, team building, leadership, delegation. And actually you can't learn that unless you're working within a team and being coached and mentored and learning on the job, as it were. You can't do it in isolation, i.e. remote working. You can't do it, I would suggest, at best when you're just working part-time. So those are the barriers that I think, or the challenges that business face whenever they are looking at their flexible or part-time working policies and designing job specifications. And so the reality is that many professional and managerial jobs, quality jobs, as Emma said, simply can't be made family-friendly and part-time. And from a business perspective, it's the employee who, that gives the most priority to work tasks rather than family tasks, who's going to be most valuable. And when we are in a position of economically challenged times, then that's where that becomes a key consideration amongst bosses. I know that's harsh, but that's actually the feedback that we get back from business. And in the issue of flexible working, it's often viewed at best with suspicion and at worst with resentment. It's a working practice which is not yet widely accepted as the norm. It is probably easier for senior people once they have an established position to take flexible working time because they will work out of hours and deliver the final objective to suit. What would help would be greater investment in IT solutions by businesses so that they enable women to work remotely. However, that opens up a greater debate about connectivity, broadband infrastructure, which would require investment in government funding. There's also an issue about if we look at the number of SMEs that are within the country. I mean, the SMEs make up over 90% of our workforce and are the companies that work within British business. And there is a perception that they will have or they will actively discriminate against women of childbearing age coming in to their employment, and will actually, partly because, and I think one of us referred to already, might have been Charlotte or Emma, SMEs don't have HR resources, therefore they are terrified by the minefield of maternity and paternity legislation. So government needs to do more to be able to help take that burden away or facilitate how we get over some of those hurdles. And I would also say that with an ageing workforce, I think there is a real threat that people, as retired people, as their funds become are more pressured with pensions reducing, that many of them will want to go back to work, and they will go back to work at a lesser rate or an equal rate to some women who are coming either starting out their careers or indeed coming back from work, which means that we don't have the consideration of someone going off on maternity leave, but you also have that added experience which could be very useful to small to medium-sized organisation as well as larger corporations. So I do think that the dynamic of where the employment profile, how it's changing in Britain, is also a consideration and an issue that women are going to have to tackle. But it's not all bad. Business is not all bad. There are, we invest a lot in taking on our people, in training our people, so why on earth would we want to lose them? But there are pockets of best practice across organisations, but I would stress that they are only pockets at the moment. It is not embedded in our culture to have a gender equality approach, in my opinion. There are companies like Accenture who have programs, mentoring programs to get people back into work, focusing on female employees, as Rhys said, showing best practice, offering guidance, supporting women on maternity leave and assistance when they're transitioning back into the workplace. But one of the main challenges for business, I think, is to get buy-in from male employees for this type of support. Women can be viewed with suspicion and resentment by male colleagues, where there is a non-understanding of, well, why are they getting this type of support? You know, what's in it for us? So I agree completely with them. I think there needs to be a gender equality culture which businesses start to embed within their workforce, because employers need to recognise and explain the benefits to everybody about retaining female talent and having a more diverse company. And it's not just the benefits to the company and the organisation itself, it's to the society as a whole. And that needs to come not just as a top-down approach. There needs to be top management buy-in to that, but that needs to be embedded into, or gender equality needs to be embedded into management strategies, into work-life policies, into work frameworks, and businesses need to then look at adapting how they cater for and attract female talent. Someone mentioned board quotas. British Chamber of Commerce does not support government quotas. We do support getting people back into work. Women on boards through non-executives are basically making up numbers. What we want to see is that there are people who are coming through the system, who come through at a junior level in a company and will be nurtured into leadership positions within that company, rather than buying in external expertise as non-exec directors. And one of the key areas that I think government needs to accelerate is, exactly as Rhys says, I think we need to get women into non-gender stereotyped career choices. And as we've already heard, women do have an interest in technology and mathematical areas. I don't think it's just getting, it's not just getting people or young girls, girls into those types of areas. I think we have to be aware that when girls make choices about the subjects they're going to study and the careers that they're going to follow, they are basically entering adolescence, which is a time when they become very aware of male and female issues. And I do think that's a consideration in them making decisions about whether or not they go into a male-dominated career. But once they do go into that, one of the main exit interview feedback that comes back from women in male-orientated sectors is the environment that they work in. It's not positive, promotion is not transparent, and they feel that they have a great lack of self-confidence, so they leave and change their career path. And the single most influencing factor in keeping them there is role models and people who've made it, and we need to get out or people in male industries need to get out and about and into schools and into mentoring the people who are the women who are already in that workforce. Very quickly, two other areas. I think careers advisor services need to be radically overhauled, and that's an area that government should put money into. I think that our career advisory service at the moment is woefully short of the knowledge of what is out there in terms of the job situation. And I'm sure that if we could work more with a more expert careers advisory service, we would have people who would be much more channeled and able to go into areas that are underperforming at the moment, and therefore add economic benefit. I don't know if anybody saw Robert Peston's initiative about speakers in state schools, and his Inspiring Future programme, which is all about bringing 100,000 normal people, like plumbers, everything from plumbers to lawyers, to go into state schools to talk about the types of careers, the types of opportunities, the types of life experiences that they've had, so that they can open up kids' minds. And I think the working of business and the career, the education system has to be much more closely merged. And again, it may be a suggestion for government to look at how you could incentivise particularly small to medium-sized enterprises to get involved in that type of activity. Last point on is just on self-employed and entrepreneurs. And as Charlotte quite rightly said, if you got women, more women into the workforce, then economic benefits could be enormous. Not only childcare is one of the main barriers to that, which I think has been covered, but it's also finance. At the moment, finance is extremely difficult. Credit's extremely difficult for any business, never mind startups. But I think if government actually want to encourage more women into business, they need to look at the credit facilities that are available. And if you look at the financial arrangements for a woman going into business and asking for a loan from a bank or any other creditor, they are much more stringent than males in the same situation. And I think that that's something which government does need to take an active look at. Charlotte made a very interesting point about people being in denial and not really seeing it as a problem. And that is one of the main things that has come back to me in business. There is an obstacle. Business doesn't think it's got a problem, and generally they don't think that they need to change or recognise that change is necessary. And whenever I've gone out and asked women about do they believe that there is a problem, many of them say they don't perceive that there is a problem with gender equality until they actually experience it for themselves, and then they realise that they are in a situation where actually there is gender inequality. So bringing about change is not an easy task. It's like a large liner changing course, and the dominating structures can be tenacious, and there is resistance out there within business to change, but that doesn't mean to say it won't change. I think that training and mentoring need to be integral to all businesses. Appraisals need to be integral to all businesses in developing their young people. Government needs to support career education. Childcare needs to be better. Financial support and business advice needs to be better. But most importantly, I think we need government to go out and shout about the benefits that women can bring economically, culturally and socially. And that's an information programme which I think we ought to be supporting and underwriting.
Great, thank you very much, Nora. Right, so an awful lot of topics there cover. So can I ask for any questions? Lady there, please.
Can I make some comments on assumptions in the political discourse? I was in Brussels about a month ago talking to people about the European Growth Strategy, and I met the European Body and Commission. And they said that what is happening is that women are being treated as a special interest group. And I think that's been replicated at national level, so that women are seen as in competition with other kinds of interest groups for political international relations, equality, and whatever. And this means that rather than that women are not seen as strategically central to what economic growth is about, and in terms of this transformation programme that Charlotte has talked about, and we need to centre stage the whole idea of gender-friendly economic growth, which is of benefit to the whole of society, using such data as is available, for example, that where there is more participation of women in the economy, then you have more equal societies. And I think that research is largely undeveloped in the report. The other point that I would like to make is that we need to pay very serious attention to the way in which women are clustered into low quality, low paid jobs in gender division of labour, work which replicates their social reproductive activities.
ability of all workers to have a say in the kind of work they're doing. And if we're going to be going beyond the elitist assumptions and just putting women onto boards, then we need to be looking at what it is for the vast majority of women to have a greater say and a greater quality of work experience, which will improve their economic capabilities over the life course and have a productive effect on the economy as a whole.
Okay, should we take comments? Anyone?
Can I just come back at one point? I think you made a very number of good and valid points there. Part of the problem, and Emma mentioned it, evidence. Businesses will come back and say, show me evidence. They will not be convinced. If they're looking after a bottom line, then until we can go back and convince business as a whole that it adds economic benefit, particularly when they're under pressure to answer to all the financial demands that they have from their shareholders, women will still be relegated to the CSR division. And that is where, I think that, and I don't think we found a solution yet, I think, we can also pay lip service to, reports that have come out of some of the Scandinavian countries about, where they've got more women in their workforce than economically they have. And I'm not actually sure if that translates well into sort of British business. So evidence is where I think
Evidence is vital. I mean, I think the Scandinavian model, we can draw upon that, but we can also draw upon existing experiences within our own. I think there are some really good examples, and there's some really good research. It's about drawing it together under a principled approach to saying that a gender-friendly economy is both demonstrably of value to the business environment, to businesses, and demonstrably of value to the common good.
But would that be anecdotal evidence, or would it be hard evidence?
I think it's a mixture. I mean, that's a good attitude.
Sorry, Charlotte.
And of course, I completely and utterly agree with you that women have ended up as this special interest group. And one of the things that has really made me very depressed around when I'm looking at these sorts of issues is the very aggressive tone that is taken by certain women who are in the sphere. So, you have Lynn Featherstone, who we all know is our lovely Minister for Equality, and she blames men for the economic mess that we're in. I just feel that is completely and utterly unhelpful. And it's not going to mean that we are going to have a nice collegiate and good conversation about how we maximise the economic potential of women. And I think going back to the issue about business, it goes back to my 29-year-olds. If it's not going to be an economic benefit, it's about to become a huge economic cost, because all these businesses have hired all these women. They're all in there, more men and women, etc., that we know, and things are about to get very, very difficult for them. But going back to what you said, there's very little research, because nobody's particularly interested, because women have been shoved to one side as sort of some sort of their CSR thing. And it is a very vicious cycle, and one which is going to take a tremendous amount of work to get us out of.
Can I just to say on the demonstrable evidence, I chaired a task force a couple of years ago on family-friendly working practices, and there is a huge amount of evidence. But we speak to employers every day, and you can find evidence to make the business case in many scenarios. I think there are two challenges. One is that there is very little longitudinal evidence that links directly business performance and productivity with a better gender-balanced workplace. And I think you can only really do that over time. You can only really track that over time. You can't just drop in and do a survey or something, come out and say 76% of employers say blah, blah. And there's a gap there because no one will invest in it properly. And I think the second issue is that employers who come to us tell us actually what really works in the case studies. So evidence is great, but what they want to see is an employer in their sector, at their size, making something work in terms of, in our agendas particularly, recruiting good quality candidates and how that has aided that business's performance. And we have a lot of case studies, but often, I'll be honest, it's the usual suspects. We have BT, who are BT, and they have offline and remote working and everything at their disposal. but your small accountancy firm around the corner cannot relate to that. So we need far more practical case studies that can help employers telling employers how they did it.
Okay, the lady at the back there.
Really quick comment. I think it's about enabling choice for businesses and for women. I think women need the opportunity to be able to choose from a broader labour market that has greater flexibility, be it full-time, be it part-time, be it a flexible combination of the two. But equally, we've got to enable businesses to be able to choose the right kind of candidate for the role that they have, and to help businesses to be able to craft roles and shape roles in such a way that works for the business. And I think it's about a balance of the two, and it's about managing expectations across the piece. So I think, I suppose my short answer, which isn't that short, is that I think it's really complicated, and there's no, women looking like men, I don't think is the easy solution at all.
I think the real problem we have in all of this is that you only live your life once. And if, as a working mother, if I had lived my life again, if I did and had children again, I would probably do it very, very differently. But I think the point is that, we do have a very varied labour market, and I think we do need to be promoting choice and flexibility. But I do not think that women have to necessarily work part-time. I think that's just an absolute, misconception. And I think that, with good childcare, with ways of working full-time but flexibly, it doesn't have to necessarily, remember, be part-time, it's just flexible. There are ways that women can have a full and meaningful career. Because after all, we have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds educating them prior to that point. And about, the stay-at-home mum, look, absolutely, if people can afford to stay at home, please do so. But also, it goes back to living your do so with a recognition of the consequences of that. I cannot tell you how many mothers I know now, my son is now 11, so I'm in that sort of age, how many mothers I know who gave up their careers are absolutely distraught. They cannot get back into the labour market, they don't know what they want to do, their self-confidence has gone through the floor, they're going to get low pensions, it has consequences for the whole of their life if they choose to drop out. And I think people have to understand that, because this vision of kitten and cupcakes, it's actually not a reality. Because as anybody who has children knows, looking after children is a damn hard, but actually it gets easier pretty quickly. Because once you've got over those really, really tough years, which is what I think where the government should really be helping mums and dads, thereafter it is actually quite manageable. You know, once they go to school and they have very set hours, etc., you can manage it. And I think it's important as well, I have a son and a daughter. I want them both to think that actually they have equality and that they have the opportunity, whether they're male or female, to go out and earn a living and actually to carve the sort of career that their education has prepped them for. I mean, I'm an engineer, sadly, sorry.
Nothing wrong with that.
I didn't go into engineering.
That is
Not because there were too many men, it's because I would have had to move to Liverpool. But, you know, we all make choices, but I think that's the point. It is choice. We can't make massive generalisations. Yeah, so choice affects everything.
But isn't it not the case that it's about businesses offering the opportunities for women coming back to work in the first place? If you know, they might want to stay at home, but they might want to come back to work, but they can't come back to work because there's nothing there for them anyway. So it's really about businesses recognising, I think you're absolutely right, that women are different from men, and mothers in particular are different from fathers.
And it's that interruption that is the big, I mean, you say it gets easy quickly, but a lot of mothers have problems with long school holidays, school with short school hours. It's not conducive to going back to work. And the problem is that for women and employers, and I think it's more on the women's side than the employer side, but once you've spent 8 or 9 years out of the labour market coming through, it's not a natural career path to then go back to where you were before, going back to uni. And bridging that gap, somehow if you could talk to women when they're 21, 22, and say, plan your career to take an 8 or 9 year gap if you want. And that's what I mean by whether we should be adjusting to the different conditions for women or men, rather than just telling them it's sad.
I've got a survey which I haven't released yet, but it basically does say that when it comes to parental leave, the one factor that nearly every single couple that we spoke to in terms of who goes back to work for money. So we're going to see the number of men staying at home is going to increase. It's already increased something like 5-fold over the last 10 years or something. But what is going to happen, and this goes back to my 29-year-olds who are about to have kids, if they are earning more than their partner or their husband or whatever, the chances are they are going back to work. A mother is not necessarily always going to say, oh, well, I'm the mother, I need to stay at home. It's a tiny fraction of people who responded to the survey said that. Sorry,
Yes,
interesting.
it's
So
not
can we-
the case
can we-
that we need to take a kind of life course approach to this, so that we understand that it affects people of extended lifespan now. They remain hale and hearty well into their 50s, 60s, perhaps even 70s. And both men and women, we need to take a view of what it is to have a working life over a much greater extended period, which may for both men and women constitute sorts of career interruptions, caring or whatever kind of reason, and be really thinking in public policy terms about what it would take to support the re-entry points.
I think that's more of a tweaking aspect in terms of business. I don't think business has the luxury of sort of being able to say, yes, that's fine, welcome in here, what's your life plan, or you want to leave in 5 years of a family, whatever. I think that there is a willingness by business, which comes back to costs and perhaps comes back to the evidence-based thing, that to recruit and train an individual when they come into the business costs a lot of money. I think you mentioned between 40 and 50,000 within the first year. I mean, that's probably the norm across a number of sectors. What is acceptable and is more of a growing practice in business is for women who are planning to have a family, is to have a period of maternity leave and then come back on a phased basis. First working 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, then 4 days where they're not losing that continuity. And I see that more as being an accepted trend within businesses, both large and small, particularly small businesses. Saves them on recruitment and retraining fees. And I think the whole dynamic of what's happening out in the workplace is changing very rapidly, mainly because of technology. We are becoming much more of a global workplace, if you like. Transport is much easier, not if you're obviously living in a family and want to work 9 to 5. But technology means that you can be Skyping somebody on the other side of the world at whatever time of day and night, and opening up new channels of both communication and ways that you manage your business. Even small businesses are beginning to look at global markets. We have different time zones that may well work. And I think women need to factor in, expand their horizons about just going into the traditional caring, domestic, retail, hotel environments, and think outside the box, which goes back to my original point that we need much more closer working relationships between businesses, going into schools and telling people at a young age what the opportunities and potential are in different areas.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I wonder if we can take a couple more, 2 questions perhaps? Maybe there.
Yeah, a quick comment and a question as well. I'm Angela Hageman from the Danish Embassy, so I'll speak from a Danish perspective. And the whole debate about flexibility in the labour market in the UK is strikes me as being very one-sided. It's always talked about flexibility as a one-way street, but coming from Denmark, where I'm socialising, it's a very flexible work market. It is a two-way street, and first of all, that means that, well, I mean, it kind of comes into, it's kind of like conflate flexibility and part-time work. Flexibility is very much a good thing when you work full-time, and it's much broader than just being about gender. So I think from the Danish experience, you have a much more content workforce, giving them the flexibility to work 4 hours, work from home, I mean, whatever really, but it works both ways. It works for the employer as well. You get a more productive workforce when you have a more content workforce. So I think you need to look at flexibility broader, particularly maybe from the employer perspective. And my question is about daycare. I don't really know too much about how it works in the UK, but I'm sure most of you know that it's very different to Denmark from myself, of course. You mentioned about sort of private daycares feeling that they get nationalised by the back doors. I was just curious to hear how they feel that, what kind of government actions make them feel that way, and more generally, what kind of childcare you see as being necessary for increased flexibility in the getting into the workforce.
Any more questions? We'll just take that one for now. Sean?
The issue with childcare is huge in this country. We have the highest cost of childcare in the OECD, and it's that what has happened with the childcare provision in this country over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, it has become more centralised. It has become more focused on the education of the child, the pre-preparing children for school. So there's now a sort of early years curriculum, etc. And the government has introduced and recently extended 15 hours a week free for 3-year-olds and now for disadvantaged 2-year-olds. What's happened is there's been a contraction in terms of the choice and flexibility of the childcare availability. Childminders have suffered a 50% fall in numbers. Now, what used to happen is that childminders used to be the flexible alternative. You used to be able to put them in for a few hours. Now we are moving much more into formal settings where you have to commit to a morning or an afternoon or certain days per week every single week, which has pushed up costs. I think there's also an issue around the rules and regulations of childcare. Obviously, all childcare providers have to be Ofsted regulated. They have to follow the early years curriculum. The parents have almost been removed from the equation. Parents are not allowed to make the childcare choices that they would probably want to do. And I think in terms of moving it forward, I think we have to look at the provision of childcare We have to look at the ratios. We have to look at, for example, this guy that I was talking to, who runs this private nursery. So he gets paid for every child, given this 15 free hours a week from the government. He gets paid a certain amount for every child. Sadly, that doesn't cover his costs. So he's between a rock and a hard place. But he's not allowed to top up. So he has no control over his income. And the other thing we need to look at, though, is broadening out the market, perhaps increasing the free schools model into the childcare, trying to make more people say, hey, not all childcare has to take place in a certain type of environment. We can be more flexible. But I think on the other side, I think we have to recognise that it goes back to the lifetime economic benefit of keeping both parents in the workforce. And that is that the government does need to help. And I think for those crunch years before school, there you might be able to introduce some sort of loan type scheme. We should also be looking at childcare vouchers, which in this country have a 2% take-up rate. That is outrageous. You know, this is free money sitting there. Why aren't people taking up childcare vouchers? Plus, they need to be extended to self-employed. So you asked about childcare, and I can sit here waffling on about it